next up is Nick Renkoski. Nick is the Director of Marketing and Communications at the Des Moines Metro Opera. He's been a long-time lover of movies, and he writes about them for the Des Moines Register and his own website.
This man here is Michael Bay. He's the most successful movie director in the last 25 years, and he thinks you all are fucking idiots. To understand how we can be in a spot where the most successful director of the last 25 years can think his audience is fools, you need to understand a little bit about the history of Hollywood. When the movies began, no one really knew what they were. The studios released as many movies as they possibly could, hoping to recoup their expenditures one bit at a time. And different studios had their own institutional marketing plan, institutional profile. If you were seeing a monster movie, for example, you knew you were at a Universal picture. If it was a high-concept literary adaptation, you knew you were at MGM. The same thing applied to stars. If you saw a Gary Cooper movie, you knew it was a Paramount picture. The same way you knew that Babe Ruth, for example, played for the Yankees. Now, a lot of that changed in the 50s and 60s because of labor laws, because of television, and the studio system broke down, which led Hollywood to start making big tentpole pictures where they put all their eggs in one basket, hoping to make an extraordinary amount of money. And it worked for a little while, but a flop would cost the entire industry. Studios went bankrupt, studios went under because they put all their money in spectacles that people didn't want to see. That allowed artists in the 60s and 70s who grew up on the movies to start running movie studios. And you saw a diverse output of many movies that reflected different audiences. And none of them were super big, but a lot of them made a lot of money because they were interesting and people hadn't seen anything like it before. Now that model changed again with the advent of the summer blockbuster ushered in by Jaws, Star Wars, Raiders of the Lost Ark, movies that were simple, that could be sold overseas, that made sense in any language. This wasn't necessarily the problem. All these movies had, Star Wars in particular, not Empire Strikes Back, but these movies had small budgets and they opened quietly and earned their large audiences. Everything changed again with the advent of Top Gun, and that is the era we're in now, which is the era of marketing. Top Gun was pre-sold. Everyone knew what it was. Everyone knew it was a gay pilot movie, and it came out and it made a ton of money. Now, I'm not hating on Top Gun. I think Top Gun's a fantastic movie, but it's remarkable. Well, I don't know if it's fantastic, but it's a competent movie, but it's remarkable in two ways. It's the most homoerotic movie major studios ever released, and it is the first and most successful in a wave in which the technical execution of a movie is more important than the character or the narrative execution. Obviously, bad movies have been made for a long time, but this is one, I should say bad, but a movie that has almost, it allowed studios to say, we can put in a minimum amount of creative effort and still make the appropriate amount of money. And that the summertime is the only time to start making money. And what we're seeing now, and the reason this trend is the longest in the history of Hollywood, is because the people who were raised on the movies in the 30s, who started running movie studios in the 60s, well, now it's people raised on Top Gun who are running movie studios, and they want to see gay pilot movies. So we're getting more of that similar type of a movie where it's more important that the product is sold and not that the movie isn't as good as the marketing surrounding it. Now, making movies requires a certain amount of risk. Always has, always will be. And but in this era in which, like I said, the product's more important than the movie itself, studios have decided that if they sell you something that marketing tells them that you want, it removes the risk. And that means we're getting a ton of sequels. Sequels, again, are not necessarily a problem. There are plenty of good sequels. But it does represent a certain creative bankruptcy, a certain loss of creative ideas. So much so that 50 sequels are going to be released in between now and this time next year, including 2 Paranormal Activity movies. That's 2. And the studios say that it's working. You look at the top 25 movies of all time, 21 of them are sequels. And I think 18 of them have been released in the last 13 years of this century. So they're saying, look, it's working, the people have spoken, and they want sequels. However, if you look at a different list, the adjusted for inflation list for the all-time top 25, only 3 of those movies are sequels, and all 3 of those are Star Wars sequels. People get the studios miss the point. An original movie comes out and it makes $1 billion, and instead of making more original movies, they make 25 copies of that original movie. Problem is, money's not worth as much as it used to be. And so they say, look, we've opened with 5 days worth of opening weekend, we've made all our money back, and that's fine. But if you spent $250 million on a movie, because it's the only movie you put all your eggs in for the year, and you made $500 million, that's great, but you've only made enough to make next year's big $250 blockbuster. And so all the creative people who want to tell original stories are going to television. People talk about TV now the way they used to talk about the movies in the late 60s and early 70s. Creative, diverse, all kinds of interesting ideas, not based on something you already know, not based on a board game or a toy or a book you read when you were a kid. Now, part of this is on us. Yes, we go to the movies. A lot of this has to do with the fact that studios only give us the same crap, so we go see it. But the way we're starting to reject some of these product-driven movies. The problem is it's always original, and this is John Carter's based on books, but this was a giant flop. None of the sequels have been real flops yet, which enforces the idea that sequels are less risky than original concepts. I work for an opera company, and we've already learned this lesson. Opera audiences aren't shrinking, but they're just becoming more selective, and the Carmens and the La Bohemes don't sell as well as they used to. We need to lead the audience a little bit. If we give them something they've never seen before, we find that people go after it. And movie studios need to do the same. Like I said, movie audiences are as big as they've ever been. They're just going to the only thing they can see. And that's garbage that they think that you've already seen. Who asked for the Smurfs 2 movie? Which, by the way, is the third biggest movie in America. Furthermore, it's not even a profitable outcome. Avatar is the fourth most expensive movie of all time. It opened in 4,365 screens and made the biggest movie in today's dollars. 11 times its production budget, and that's great. E.T. made 700 times its production budget. It's a small movie. No one thought it had much of a chance, even though it was directed by the most successful director of all time. And it only cost a tiny fraction of what Universal was doing that year. And in inflated dollars is twice as large a hit as Avatar. Thanks.